One day, Marty Stewart, I think it was Marty Stewart and Porter Wagner came in and wanted to take me and Jim Triggs golfing. So we said, man, we can't go. We got to stay here and do some stuff. So Triggs goes, hey, why don't we just play a round of golf right through Gibson? Gibson had this huge aisle right down the center, and off the one side's assembly, finishing over there, Whitewood down there. We go down to the end of this, 100-yard thing, and we put a can down there, right? Golf balls are just flying off into finishing. People are ducking under, I mean, they're dinging the out of guitars, right? We're forward, face, duck, right? And
welcome back to the Acoustic Shop Knows People Special Edition, guys. This is the special edition. We are at the Raleigh, North Carolina World of Bluegrass. IBMA's convention every single year has been in Raleigh. Now it's back here, but it won't be here next year.
It's the final year at Raleigh, so we decided we're finally going to have Greg Rich on the podcast.
Well, I think by the way, we have Greg Rich in here.
Back into this introduction.
We're going to back into the introduction.
The reason we're doing this is I've seen a lot of really famous podcasts where they start going live. They do like a live tour. So we decided we would do that, and we got 5 people here.
I hear this is where the money's made.
Yeah, we're playing for a live studio audience here of our entire crew. Yeah, that's very, very good. But no,
thank you guys.
We have Greg in here. Greg has been around Greg Rich, the music industry for quite some time, and we want to talk about some stories and things. This is actually, is this your first time in Raleigh for the IBMA convention?
This is the first time I've been allowed back.
Yeah, and now we got this hurricane coming on.
I knew it was the last year they couldn't ban them.
Yeah. Well, I went out in Owensboro, so they finally let me back in.
That's a few years in between the two.
Wow.
Yeah, I took a lot of attorneys and apology letters.
So that is actually your last time to be at an IBMA convention?
Yes, that's
really?
Yeah.
See, that was our first one was in Louisville.
It was the first year they moved it there.
Yep.
And we did the Nashville years.
Yep. So when you were back here, Greg's been is now with Recording King and the Music Link, doing quite a bit of cool designs and also building still your own banjos, correct?
Well,
under the Recording King
name. The Recording King name, yes. Yeah.
So again, for those that don't know, Greg
let's start way back at childhood.
Okay, yeah, Greg, give us a quick rundown of your childhood.
The formative years.
Wait, starting from when? Well, because
whenever you want.
So what brought you to the banjo and the banjo designing that led to the Gibson relationship?
Actually, I started at the Boys Club.
Really?
Yeah, they had a wood shop there, and the wood shop teacher, taught me how to turn a lathe, sandwood, plastics, metal polishing. So I got kind of the basic background there. And then I went on to lapidary work, which is stone cutting.
I was going to say, you just said a word that I don't think anybody should say.
Yeah, it's like the polishing and cutting of stones. And
I guess it's all right then.
I specialized in opal.
A dirty word.
I specialized in opal.
Really?
Yeah. And I developed a system for cutting black opal, which came on the market when I was about 16 years old, and it was selling for like $30,000 to $50,000 a carat. And here I am, just 16 years old, cutting black opal for people mailing it to me, getting like $50, $60 a stone, I didn't know any better. I mean, $50, and what's $50? I mean, my bank account was,
That's right. I know you. I hear you.
Right. So
I hear that's exactly what I would do for $50.
Did you realize the value of the stuff?
No, I had no idea. I could care less. It's just an opal. So I was at the San Fernando Lapidary Show, and I just won the California State Championship at 16 years old with my opal collection. That night, the director of the club dropped me off at my house, and that was on a Sunday night. And I remember walking in, and the Glenn Campbell show was on TV. And I stopped when Larry McNeely was playing Arkansas Traveler.
Very cool.
And I just remember staring at the TV and watching Larry sit down and solo that, and it just blew me away. The next day, I took all my lapidary stones, all my opal, and went and traded it in at a pawn shop for a banjo, and I never cut another stone.
Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. My parents were pissed.
That's the best origin story I've ever heard, I think.
They were pissed. I
imagine. Because they probably invested a whole bunch of money.
You went to a pawn shop.
I was setting diamonds at that age, doing lost wax casting. I gave it all up, right? Went down and traded like for a harmony banjo or
You're every parent's dream.
Right.
It's like, hey, yes, oh man, my kid, he's rocking it. He's gonna do things in this
He's gonna be
world.
a what? A banjo player?
Mom, Dad, I don't need college money. I've got a plan.
Yeah. So
awesome.
I that's it. I gave up everything to play banjo, locked myself in a room, and just started playing banjo. And I eventually got to meet some really top collectors that lived in the Costa Mesa, Newport Beach area, and they kind of took me in and started showing me things about vintage instruments and what's this, what's that. And I just fell in love with banjos, the idea of wanting to build a banjo. And the first banjo that I really wanted to build was a Florentine, a Gibson Florentine. So I started one at the top. So my mentor, Randy Snoddy, at that time goes, well, you're going to have to do some research. So I started going to gun shows, asking gun engravers how to engrave, went to auto shows to learn how to ask them about painting, lacquering at the time was big, went to wood carving shows, to learn how to carve wood. And eventually, my very first banjo was a Gibson Florentine.
For those watching or even listening, the Florentine was a highly ornate banjo from Gibson had built it. It has this really cool harp and a bunch of feathers and engraved and carved into the resonator, as well as the neck shape is actually carved, the heel.
Yeah,
and all
carved
that.
heel.
And then obviously tons of engraved metal parts, all gold plated. Super fancy piece. So I'm
showpiece.
Not everybody knows what the Florentine is.
hand painted scenes of Venice, Italy
That's right,
on
and
the
painted
fingerboard.
too, yeah.
Rhinestones set in the peghead. They were just crazy. But so that was the first banjo. And as I just got better and stuff, my first job was really engraving dobros for Dobro in Huntington Beach. Doing that. And now I'll get you to Gibson, right?
So you moved through, and you said one of your mentors. By the way, I actually did get to speak with him one time when I was a kid. This is my side into this. I worked at a music store in Colorado called the Old Town Pick and Parlor, and that's where I grew up. Me and my dad were actually there from when they first started. So you probably know Banjo Bill. Back in the day, he was doing the partnership with them, and then moved on. I was working at that shop as a 15-year-old kid, and I got to talk to R.C. Snoddy. I thought, because he was the banjo expert.
Right.
Really, when we would get anything vintage in, that was one of the first guys that we would call.
Well, you had Harry West, R.C. Snoddy, Tut Taylor, just a few of those guys. Randy Wood.
Yep.
Those were the original vintage collectors. George Gruen.
And working on them too, not just collecting, but they were. Yeah. They were in the midst of it, figuring out how to get these things back in shape and make them get back on the market.
And Randy helped me go to guitar school, paid for my way, because after I just began my career, I didn't have any money left.
Sure, I hear you.
So he helped pay for me to go to.
So mom and dad are like, no,
mom and dad were like, hell no,
nope.
we're not getting you a damn thing.
You had potential.
Fool us
we
once.
didn't find out, how did the banjo turn out? Your first banjo, you set your sights very high, and you went and learned how to do wood carving, and I'm sure some of the experience you had with stone cutting helped, and then engraving. How did it actually turn out?
It looked like my first banjo. Anyway.
So it wasn't just like
I mean,
on the gate.
on the scenes, like they would have the scenes of Venice, Italy. I added some extras, like little guys peeing under the bridge, stuff like guys jumping off the buildings. It was kind of a unique.
Some
type of
hidden messages.
So
in
what
there.
you're saying is, those of us who know you know that this did
hasn't
not
changed.
come as in adulthood. This was This is the kid that just never grew out.
Exactly. And as a matter of fact, if you ever see some of my Florentines today, look at the 5th fret under the bridge, because he's still there taking a whiz.
That's awesome.
I tried to
buy one now.
I tried to change. It didn't work for me.
This guy's stick. Did you end up keeping that banjo? Or did you end
No,
up selling it to make your next
I
one?
ended up selling it, on some other, but like.
That's good. I mean,
Make money somehow. You got to pay for the next one. Right?
Yeah, I got right. Pay for
those parts aren't cheap. They're not free.
They weren't cheap then. They're
So that got you to start building banjos.
Yeah. So,
did you start building anything else at this point?
I built some guitars.
Did you?
Yeah, and then I ended up throwing them right in the fireplace. or most people that got them did.
Yeah,
These are nice, Greg.
So, so my question is, you're now building some stuff, and you're really getting in, because this is the cool thing about you as a builders. You're taking on a lot of aspects. Most luthiers / builders take on one aspect and really get great at that, and the other stuff they know what they're best at. Like, could be an inlay guy, it could be a parts guy, it could be the woodworking, it could be whatever it is, the sound, voicing, whatever it happens to be. But it seems like you were taking on all of the aspects of this.
At first I did, but then I realized, really my thing was designing musical instruments, and what my strength was: metal engraving, carving, painting. With CNCs coming into the picture later down the road, there was no reason to hand cut pearl anymore and kill yourself with the dust.
Yeah.
I mean,
again, a little background for people that don't know. That is one of the most dangerous parts of building instruments, was cutting pearl. That little dust gets down inside your lungs and will literally cut it open. And just
well, I
eat you
don't
from the
think
inside.
people realized it for years. Spraying lacquer in the spray booths at Gibson, people,
No mask. Just...
well, they didn't think about it back then.
So you said you went to work at Dobro, and then they put you into the engraving. Is that where you really cut your teeth at getting better at metal engraving?
So that's,
was it metal and wood Dobro?
Yeah, when you're engraving like 3 Dobros a day, you really get kind of fast at it. And so
was that the beginning of the wood sandblasted era?
No, well, I don't know when those exactly started. I was doing like the Wild Rose, the tricones, that kind of stuff, the metal body stuff.
Oh, really cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That engraving was just always so cool and
Yeah,
ornate.
like the national stuff. But that's when Don Young was running, and then went on to, do national. But,
So then you said you now move into Gibson.
So Gibson kind of starts like this. About 1986, Henry Jeskowitz and Dave Berryman.
Height of the crazy party scene, I might add, before we get started into this.
Yeah, it got even worse than you think. They had worked. Gibson was reissuing the Gibson Granada at the time, and it didn't go so well. I mean, they showed it to Sonny Osborne, and he just basically ran it down and said, "Get the hell out of here with that thing." So they were bringing the banjo to California for the NAMM show in January, and Jim Triggs was already working at Gibson doing the mandolins, and I was downstairs engraving for Dobro, and he came down and said, "Greg, will you come up and take a look at this Granada and see what you think?" So I went up there, and Henry Jeskowitz, Dave Berryman, and everybody was in the room. They put it out, and I just said, "No, everything's wrong on this. It's not gonna go over." So Henry flew me out to Nashville the next week, and I just basically said, "If you just let me do it my way, just give me 6 months, to get this thing right, and I'll re-show you the banjo." So I scrapped everything they had in the works.
I bet they were real happy.
Yeah, $150,000 worth of engraved parts, all this that they had gotten from other vendors, from the Michigan contacts. And man, there was some major clashes because a lot of those Gibson people were from Kalamazoo, and they said, "Well, Greg, you got to use our vendors." I said, "I ain't using none of your damn vendors." So we put together the very first Granada, and I called Doug Hutchins. You know Doug Hutchins? Well, he was kind of a...
No, I do. I know of the name. I don't know. Yeah.
He was a good friend of Sonny's, and he called me and goes, "Greg, you got to take the banjo to Sonny now." And I was scared to death because I kind of knew Sonny's reputation, right?
Tell you what he thinks.
It wasn't good. And here I am, kind of this long-haired kid from California, going to bring him a Gibson Granada banjo. So he arranges it for Saturday night, goes backstage and see him at the Opry. So I go in, I bring the banjo in, and he's just looking at me like, what is this? And I said, "I got this new Granada to show you, and would you mind taking a look at it?" So he starts looking it over, and he starts quizzing me like really hard about, how thick is that fingerboard? How's this? How's that? What kind of wood is that? How's that finish done? How's that hand engraving done? And I answered every question. So he starts strumming it a little bit, and he has his old Granada laying next to it. He takes the strap off of it, puts it on the new Granada, and he's playing with it. And then just then he calls he's playing it. He goes, "Follow me." And just then they called for the Osborne brothers to come out onto the stage, and he carried the new banjo out onto the stage of the Grand Ole Opry on a Saturday night live, gave me a gave Gibson a 10-minute commercial on the new Gibson Banjo. When I walked in the office Monday morning, there were 350 orders for the new Gibson Granada Banjo.
That's awesome.
So
awesome.
after that, it was no problem.
So your original prototype, was that done in a Hearts and Flowers pattern or Flying Eagle pattern?
It was a Hearts and Flowers. Okay. Yeah.
Because that was the Granada came in 2 different patterns.
Yeah,
correct?
Flying Eagle and Hearts and Flowers.
So once you had come up with a prototype, had you had any experience before setting up, like, all right, here's now our process so that it can be mass produced?
Yeah, I also found all the new vendors. I used Brian England in Litchfield, Kentucky, custom inlay to do the inlay work. And back then, he was hand cutting every inlay.
Yeah.
I mean, his business started because of what I gave him. It's like I used Bill Sullivan to fit the tone rings. We found all the original dies for the flanges.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And had them retooled. I sent them out to a friend in California. I had a chance to get a hold of, Randy had Hank Williams Jr.'s RB3 wreath. So I pulled it apart and I ran the. And
Did he know that you told him
I
apart?
told him. I said, Randy, I got to go get this tone ring tested, right? And I ran it down to a friend of mine who worked at Hughes Aircraft Company, and I said, hey, Ed, would you run this metal over a spectrograph for me and see what it is? And he did. He goes, yeah, this is the formula that's in that tone ring. And it turns out it was nothing special. It was just a yellow brass from the 1930s, commonly used in musical instruments. Mm-hmm. So we started pouring that, and it just took off. Then we introduced the 3s, the 4s, and then Earl came in, after he'd heard what. And
I'm curious, like, before that happened, like, you were in engraving, so you probably weren't like really in charge of a major team at Dobro at that time. How did you learn how to get all these vendors together, put together a production process?
I like to credit to the stuff I did at the Boys Club, like learning how to polish metals, sanding wood. So I could go into a department when they were hand sanding the necks, and I could see, no, you're sanding vertically here. You've got to go this way. I could go into the polishing room where they're buffing necks, and I said, man, you're burning the necks here. So it was kind of weird, but I just felt like it just came naturally to see this stuff,
I find that very interesting because that's a pretty big position to all of a sudden you put up into.
Yeah, I'm surprised they gave it to me.
We'll get to them regretting that later.
Yeah.
So at this point, you're full adult. You're running this deal, right?
Adult.
You're
By age.
adulting age. Working on, and I remember when this was when I was pretty young. My dad was getting really into this banjo run. The rings that you were using at those times, did you guys cast those, or was that the Coolish rings?
That was Coolish, yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
I worked with Coolish and Jim Burlisle to get those rings done.
And that kind of changed everything for the banjo. Because I remember this, there were people doing reissue banjos, but not in any kind of real numbers. Like it was, there was small builders building.
Yeah, there was, Stelling was building stuff. Saga had the Gold Star banjo out, and there was small first quality banjo, kind of doing small independent stuff. But we brought it all back, put back the Gibson name, the models, the pre-war specs,
which is a tough thing. And I think, again, we can talk about whether you agree with it or not, but this part of the legacy of, we've talked about this with the mandolins, the Gibson mandolins. This is what Gibson was all about. By the time the 1920s and 30s came around, Gibson was all about banjos. That was an important part of the world of music and what Gibson was doing. And then it kind of wasn't, and there's some good banjos that were built in the 40s and 50s and 60s, but not to the level of what they were doing in that early run. And that's when you came in and said, I've seen all these, I know what this is supposed to be like.
I through getting to be around the top collectors, I got to see every banjo from Bacon and Day to Vega to Gibson. I would get to pull them apart, study them, photograph them, do rubbings on all the engravings. So I have a huge, extensive file of all pre-war banjos, and that's what I just studied. I loved everything about them, all that hook isn't right, So
I saw recently you put up some posts. I'm not going to talk about those posts. I'm going to talk about the ones where you had drawings of some of that original, the inlays and the stuff that was built for Gibson at that period of time. Was that you doing that on your own, or was that part of the process?
one day I'm at Gibson, and one of the engineers comes to me and goes, "Hey, Greg, do you like old blueprints?" And I said, "Yeah, what's going on?" She goes, "Well, Henry just ordered all the old blueprints to be dumped in the trash can."
Really?
I go, what do you mean, old blueprints? You know, that old stuff, from way back. You've never seen a person run to a trash can faster.
Now, is this including like not just the banjos?
This is banjo, mandolin, lore blueprints.
All the really cool
all
guitars,
the stuff.
the arch tops.
We dove into the dumpster, right? We're pulling out stuff, So I come away with just stacks of original drawings, for the bell-shaped truss rod cover, the L brackets, this, that, the flange. You
wonder why Gibson lost its way in that period. Just throw that stuff out. Nobody wants to
throw that crap out.
Nobody
So
wants
man,
that. It's flying V's. That's what they want.
It's flying V's and Les Paul. When Slash coming in?
We need more room for Slash to set his drinks.
I love it. So they're going to trash all this stuff.
Yeah, they trashed it. I got it.
Really? That's awesome.
Yeah.
And now, of course, but I do have to say, what year was that roughly, you think?
When they trashed the stuff, I'd say about 1990.
Really?
Yeah.
I would have thought it was going to be more in that early 80s. Because there was a weird...
Not early 80s.
There was a weird period of time when I think everybody, not just... I know we pick on Gibson. We can pick on all the manufacturers, honestly, from those time periods.
Call them out when they need to be called out.
Where they need... I think they all kind of decided that, this stuff is how they used to do it. We've got better now. We've got more technology. We can do things.
People aren't really that concerned with
And
these
they're not-
details.
and
We can get
The
more of them
market's
out there.
moved on.
And the
That's
market's
the biggest
moved on.
thing
I
with
think a
them
lot of
is
people
just-
thought that was the case, but they kind of forgot about music instruments are artists, people. These are people who want to, they're tying in the world that they grew up with, and then their heroes grew up with before that. And it's like you're slowly putting all that into one place. And I think some of these manufacturers were coming in from the business side of it, where we're like, that stuff doesn't
Build it
matter
like a
anymore.
car.
Oh, the battles I had to go through. I mean, in the beginning, Henry, as soon as he saw the banjos take off, I remember we were the first division under Henry to turn $1 million, in banjos in 1 year.
Which is sad for the world, and anybody that knows, there's too many of those.
Which is to let that many banjos out in the public was,
We now
was
know.
a crime.
We now know what happened to America. Right there.
Right. But they were so into they had Jim Triggs working, they had Ren Ferguson, Steve Carlson, they had all these incredible luthiers that just knew Gibson history and the models, and that period, those instruments that came out were really spectacular. Then, Henry starts buying up different companies, and this is where that greed comes in. I mean, let's buy this name, and
It moved on. So you became then kind of head of the more custom division, right?
one day, they said they didn't have money for bonuses for the supervisors. So they said, well, you guys can build whatever you want. So I looked over at Jim Triggs and I said, hey, Jim, you couldn't have a new guitar. So I said, I pulled a Les Paul out of the scrap can and I had Jim Triggs cover it in perloid, right? And I started doing scenes of Venice on it, on the back, on the fingerboard. It's in Gruen's book. Rhinestones in the picket, and I remember that guitar was going through finishing, and people were just laughing. So who hired this guy, right? So we were at the Nashville Guitar Show, and I had it on display, right? And this collector walks over, he introduced him, he said, what do you want for that guitar? And I just started laughing. I said, that guitar right there is going to cost $5,000. Okay, I'll take it. Right? And he just willed out. And Triggs was looking at me, we're building more with plastic.
There's that bonus.
We got to get more plastic, cover up the wood.
But again, that comes back to, though, part of what I was saying, which is these are musicians that are getting into this, that want to see this tie from the old world
Right.
to the new world. And at that time, again, for those who may not be followers of musical instruments, when Perloid came out and they were using it on banjos and
Yes.
mandolins and all that, this was a high-end, super
Fancy.
special thing. When, the Kel Croydon banjos, where they were completely covered in this mother of toilet
Making
seat
Right.
style
balloons.
plastic.
Right.
All that kind of stuff. And the mandolins, you saw that one that has the rhinestones all around. I forget what they call that one.
fingerboard.
Yeah, but this was something in that time period that, for those people, this was a high-end product.
Yeah.
And then you now have somebody, now we're talking about the 80s, 90s, in that area, that's going, wait, you just took a Les Paul and you tied in this
right.
weird thing and yet made it modern. Because that one was also not just in Perloid, right? You did some other...
Well, we painted it pearl white. We bound it with, I think, Christmas tree binding. I made some the Christmas tree binding. We did this snow cone peg head or something up on it. I forget, but it's
some
sold.
crazy stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, it sold so quick, and so I went to Henry and I said, Henry, I'd like to do these custom instruments, and here's the deal I'll cut with you. You just supply the whatever the material and labor is, and I'll do all the custom work, and we'll split the profit 50-50 after you get all your money back. Whatever we invest for inlays, and he goes, oh, that sounds fair. I'll do it. He goes, but there's one condition, Greg. You got to take all your instruments from scrap. So every day we'd go out to the scrap pile, pull this, neck, that,
Really?
and we'd start putting in. And we went to the first NAMM show, and I think they had, 4 or 5 pieces. And Mac Yasuda, from the Samora Corporation, walked in, looked at the 5 instruments. How much? I said $25,000 for those. And he goes, okay, here's a check. And he walked in, and from then on, every NAMM show, the instruments just got wilder and wilder. And other companies like Fender and Martin, they would come to our booth to see what the hell is going
What's
on
Greg
over
doing
there.
over there?
I mean, the custom shop became so powerful because, I included all the Gibson employees in it. If you worked on a custom guitar, after it sold, I would go out and hand the buffer,
Awesome.
$300, $400. Did you spray it? Here's $500. So they were making side money off these art instruments, and it's the only way I thought was fair, right? I mean, if I'm going to make money, why not spread it around? Sure. It got so big that pretty soon we're doing all the country music stars. People were coming in. One day, Marty Stewart, I think it was Marty Stewart and Porter Wagner came in and wanted to take me and Jim Triggs golfing. So we said, man, we can't go. We got to stay here and do some stuff. So Triggs goes, hey, why don't we just play a round of golf right through Gibson? Right?
I heard this story, actually, from Jerry. Jerry told me about this story, so I know where this is going, but you need to finish it. I won't.
So Gibson had this huge aisle right down the center, and off to one side's assembly, finishing over there, Whitewood down there. We go down to the end of this, 100-yard thing, and we put a can down there, right? Swing. Golf balls are just flying off into finishing. People are ducking under, I mean, they're dinging the out of guitars, right? We're forward, face, duck, right? And anyway, the supervisor, he's looking at this going, what in the is this, right? He didn't know who Porter or Marty was. These two clowns, they got to go, right? So they call up Henry. Henry, God damn it, Greg and Jim Triggs are out of control. Henry comes steaming through the front door, right? He walks in, he sees it's Porter Wagner and Marty Stern. He goes, oh, he doesn't know. So what does he do? He picks up a golf club and he starts playing. I mean,
Yeah, join them.
right? I mean,
Jerry Lambert was working at Gibson as well. Well, we had on the podcast. He told me this story, and I was just like, "Yep, sounds like Greg to me."
But it wasn't Greg's idea, so he just joined in.
Well, it probably was, but it was part of that. You and Jim Triggs were kind of known as the wild guys at Gibson.
Yeah. We would go to the thrift stores and buy the most mismatched crap we
Which
could
he
buy.
still does today.
Yeah, well, I mean, I
Today, this is actually, for those of you who are watching this is the most decent dressed I have ever
I think
seen.
the recording king
Greg.
music league team.
I had to
dressed him
sign.
today.
I had to sign some documents. It's
We picked out your wardrobe.
Yeah,
Mr. Rich.
actually, my wife finally said, this is
First
important.
time, so I don't, not to derail too much. First time I ever see Greg, we're going to our first NAMM show as the Acoustic Shop, actually. And I go over, and at this time you are working at Recording King, and I see this guy over here. He's got a pink jacket on, the brightest yellow pants, weird white shoes. I mean, everything about this outfit is just. I just don't want to.
It's made for NAMM. I mean,
Yes.
it fit in perfectly
right,
in
right.
NAMM.
And he's
What's
got
the problem?
He had glasses on that were like just very bold, and somebody goes, "Hey, that's Greg Rich over there." And I look at him. I said, no way. I'm not going to talk to that guy. Wait, he's the guy talking about banjo?
Right.
No way. So anyway, but yes, now, so you've done so much stuff at there. And by the way, if you have not had a chance, get on and look at some of the crazy stuff that was coming on in that 90s era of the Gibson Custom Shop.
Not just crazy. It's
It's
incredible.
creative and artistic.
Yes.
But they were such bold choices, too.
Bold, but well done.
Well, you just talked about how he dressed. He did the same thing with the
What's the
I wouldn't say his dress was bold, but well done. But yeah.
Well, we built that white Florentine mandolin,
Yes.
the bitch Baldessari had. And I remember Jim. I told Jim, I said, Jim, go find the best flame maple you can get, right? And he'll build, and he goes, I got it. And I said, now cover it all in perloid, right? And
That was coming.
right?
Because I've seen that man.
Yeah, right.
Exactly what you were
He
gonna
goes,
say.
and how we got? I said, we're going to use tortoise shell binding. We're going to paint it pearl white. And yeah,
Could use that wood.
But we did stuff like that. And I said, when we're gone, Jimmy, somebody's going to have that instrument, and they're going to. Going to need to be restored or something, and they're going to find the most beautiful flame maple under that. And go, oh, sons of
It's like every home developer that goes into an old 40s and 50s home and goes and starts pulling layers and layers of linoleum off of the floor and goes,
Look
this
at
is the most incredible wood floor.
Walnut, solid walnut, cherry wood. Well, who was the ass that covered it? You're looking at him.
So we're building some of the coolest banjos, mandolins. The banjo department at this point is doing pretty well.
Yep.
Because you now have a full lineup.
Yep.
You're doing threes. Was the 250?
Fours,
Yeah, while you were there, did you
250s.
do the 250 again?
Yes, yeah,
All
we
right.
redid it. Yep.
So we have all these various different models. They're back again and still doing custom banjos as well. And this is, to this day, considered the best modern era of all Gibson banjos. For those of you who don't know, there is an actual coin term, the Greg Rich era.
Error.
It's the Greg Rich
depends on who you
era
talk to.
of banjos. And my dad actually has one, which was, he has and he's very proud of, he has one of the Earl Scruggs deluxes.
Yeah.
That was basically a Granada.
Yeah, basically go down.
Nothing,
Yeah.
and he's very, very proud to say he's got one of those. And I play it, and I like it too. So,
yeah.
But now, ended up you leave, and you can talk about
First,
it.
is there any story with Earl Scruggs when you brought back the Earl Scruggs banjo?
Oh, yeah. So me and Jim,
call, Jerry.
me
Good
and Jim
call.
had our mismatch outfits on. I remember I looked like, my hair was just slicked back, like, greasy and white patent shoes, of course. And I get this call, Greg, Mr. and Mrs. Scruggs are here to meet you. I look down at what I'm wearing.
He said, I'm ready.
Henry goes, yeah, we're here to talk about redoing the Earl Scruggs banjo, to get it up to standard. And Jim and me both have our outfits, so we need to see you guys up in the office. So I come in, and I just remember Louise looking at me.
Which, again, I'm doing a lot of clarifying. I'm going to keep trying to do it, though. Louise ran Earl Scruggs' business.
That's Earl's wife.
Yes, well, she
And very
ran the
shrewdly.
business side. Everything that her and the boys would do had to go through, Earl and the boys would do had to go through her.
Yeah.
And
So
she did a great job, too.
right off the top, Earl was looking at me like, what the hell is this? This guy.
This is the guy.
This is the guy. This is the guy that wrecked the buffet at the Hero Club. This is the guy. So Earl goes, well, I see what you did with the Granadas. Can you redo my banjo? I said, yeah, sure, but you have to give me, again, control of making your banjo good. And his banjo, so we redid it, but the stickler was the tuners. That we had the shallower D tuners on there. And I said, we're going to have to dump those tuners and get Keith tuners on there. Well,
I remember those.
remember that? Well, there was that huge battle between Earl and Bill Keith, over the book. And man, those were fighting words. And Earl said, "Oh, I'm never using those tuners on my banjo." And I said, "Well, we have to use them." And he goes, "No, never. They're not going on my banjo." And I said, "Earl, if I could get Bill to remove his name off that tuner and put Gibson on there, would that be okay with you?" He goes, "He won't do it." I said, "Give me 5 minutes." I walked in the other room. I called Bill. I said, "Bill, here's the deal. I want to do this." He goes, "Done. Do it." Because Bill was a businessman. I mean, hundreds and I walked back in. I go, "Okay, that's a done deal. He'll do it." And Earl goes, "You got complete control of the banjo after that." Awesome. He never, cool. and it again became another huge seller for us.
That was probably the seller. I mean, all those other banjos were important, but the fact was, I remember I started selling banjos as a kid at the Old Town Pick and Parlor, and we sold Gibson banjos, but the banjo to have was the Earl Scruggs banjo. Yeah. I mean, those are all, the other models were great, but that was the hero's banjo. Well, and they were all signed labels, too.
The original, really cool. If you have one signed with the blue ink, he hand signed those. And then it was like 1,984 of them he signed. And after that, they went to a printed signature. But, some people were, standard Gibson guys wanted 3s, 4s, Granadas, and then the Earl. But when I left, every banjo was hundreds of models back ordered. So
it was definitely strong. So now you're working with Earl and getting that all done, and he ended up being happy because it was a different banjo. The one before that they built, the Earl Scruggs banjo, did not look like Earl's banjo.
Well, surprisingly, here's the deal. It actually did look like Earl's banjo at the time.
Really?
Yes. Earl's banjo, his original Granada was that bad looking. It had a replacement neck on it, had been redone, and it was actually kind of a blondish, terrible looking banjo. Yeah.
It had the small headstock because they had done
terrible hearts and flowers.
They had cut a new overlay because he had damage to it. So Gibson tried to fix it. All those stories. So
when Gibson actually copied it, they copied it badly but perfectly. I mean, they actually did a good job. So we got that redone, and everything was fine.
Gotcha.
So then what happened? No, you don't have to go into detail.
Then you weren't there anymore.
Well,
do we want to make it that short?
Well, I mean, it just came to a thing where they hired in some guy from the Navy who was going to tell me, "Oh, Greg, we're going to paint the walls gray in Gibson, and no artist can come in and visit you." We'd have people every day, Alan Shelton, Earl Scruggs, everybody would come down to the Gibson to hang out in the banjo department and their banjos play, and
they're viewing this as wasted time, and we can be more efficient.
I'm just saying, well, you can kiss my ass. We're not going to tell Earl Scruggs he can't come in, and it just got to be, well, Greg, we need to fire one of your employees and produce 3 more banjos per week. And I'd say, I'll tell you what, fire me and keep my employees because I don't need to be here for that, And this went on for months, and then finally, they just said, "Oh, well, we want to buy your name, and we'll pay you this much money." And I just said, "I'm not selling my name." So they said, "Well, in that case, you're leaving." So they got rid of me.
So then you're gone for a while and came back. And I know there's some other stuff in between. I don't know how.
Rich and Taylor.
You did the great. That's right. I forgot about Rich and Taylor. Yeah. So that was a joint effort with you and Tut Taylor, correct?
Tut Taylor and Mark Taylor, his son.
That's right. Mark Taylor too. Yep. So you were building the banjos. You guys redid dobros too. Was that? Yep. Were you involved in the dobro redesign?
Not really. That was kind of Tut Taylor and Mark took care of that, and mine was just redesigning the new banjo line.
They came from Crafters of Tennessee, correct?
Yes.
And we're building those banjos and guitars and, dobros. And then you guys started building ones. Yeah. Now, what was cool there was you brought back in artists again and made lots of signature models.
Well, that was interesting because when they fired me and I started Rich and Taylor, almost every endorsing artist for Gibson told Gibson to shove it up there and came over to Rich and Taylor, and except I say maybe Little Roy Lewis and a couple other people, but everybody came and supported us.
Well, you had you had the big guys. You had a Sonny Osborne.
We had Sonny Osborne. We had J.D. Crowe, Terry Balcom, Don Wayne Reno.
These were and they were great banjos, and the dobros were fantastic too because they were bringing back all the great parts of Dobros, making those sound as good.
Yeah.
Again, I was in my beginnings of really getting into instruments and learning how those were all being done, and this was like, this is the era,
yeah.
you know. So that went well. Was short-lived.
It was short-lived. I mean, the company started. Gibson sued us right off the top.
Is that true? I didn't know that.
Yeah. They were trying to put us out of business. Luckily, we had business insurance, and we sued them back for stuff. And it just took its toll. You know, the company just didn't have the investment capital to really do it right. And you know.
One thing that I thought was really cool about the Rich and Taylor stuff was you were doing things that held nod to original stuff, but you were smart enough to keep it far away because you had to know that they were going to come.
Yeah,
after
no,
you
I mean
for inlay patterns. And,
right. I mean, I
and
changed
shapes
everything.
and all that,
You know, so we did all that. You know,
which is really, really cool. And then you move on, and now you're with the Music Link.
the Music Link. Yes.
And bring back the Recording King name. And were you? Is that part of you, or was?
Yeah, that's after I had left Gibson, I trademarked the name Recording King because I'd always loved the banjo.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I always thought, you know, they were made by Gibson, so I trademarked it. And
So Gibson didn't have the trademark at that time?
No, they didn't have it. And I also
threw it out with all the
and
blueprints.
also the lore. You know, so what happened there was, Tony Williamson was in Gibson one day, and he had brought in like 3 or 4 lures with him, and we were all in the custom shop looking at them, and look at this lure, and look at this lure, look at this lure. And I remember looking at Jim, and I said, hey, Jim, if you ever leave Gibson, you should start a mandolin company called The Lore. And we laughed like, wouldn't that be funny? As soon as they fired me, I trademarked the name The Lore.
Good thinking.
And, you know, built a couple, got a trademark, man, they were
So
pissed.
for all of you guys listening out there, never hire Greg because he will take all of your property
Don't leave
and trademark
anything.
it.
Secure everything.
Secure
Matter of fact-
all your
matter of fact,
IP.
I'm taking these mics and some other shit.
Anything he says, go out and trademark it right away.
There's some
Right.
folks here from the
Yeah,
Music
do-
Link right
do
now that
yourself
are
a
going,
favor,
wait a
trademark
second.
it.
Yeah, wait a
Yeah.
second here. Why do we have this guy?
and
here?
know what you're trademarking.
So I did not know that because originally you guys for Music Link were putting it guitars out as the Johnson name, and those were doing. But when it switched over to the Recording King name, it wasn't too many major changes to the guitars. I don't think from that time period was there. A few little things.
you know, it took a while. Like any new production thing, you know, our product manager Travis, you know, Ashley's brother, had to. You know, he had to kind of work. Me and him had to work on the designs together. Then get it into production the way we wanted. So, I mean, there's a really steep learning curve in doing the guitars right, and it took us a while. But you know, and in the banjos, you know, like no, this is how they got to be. This is, you know, but.
I'm interested. How did you end up coming across these guys? Like, did they know that you'd left Gibson and then went out and found you after the Richard Taylor?
No, I had gone to work for Saga, and I designed all the Blue Ridge stuff for Saga and all that. And I remember I was at a NAMM show, and somebody introduced me to Steve Petrino and said, oh, this is Greg. He does all that designing over at Saga. And he goes, you're the guy that did the Jeton guitars, Blue Ridge, Regals. I said, yeah. He goes, man, what would it take to hire you? And I said, well, not much, the way I'm getting paid.
Apparently not much.
What do you got? I mean, what's available today? You know, I liked Richard Kelson as a person. I didn't like the company ethics and stuff. So he offered me a job and I said, and if you'll do this, I've got Lauren Recording King. And he said, let's do it. So
Very cool. So it seemed like you were getting involved in the guitars first. Banjos came a little bit later. Was there a reason?
no, I
behind
think
that?
actually, didn't the banjos come first really out of it? Yeah, the reissue RKR80.
I didn't know. I remember selling the
Because we had really changed the name from Johnson to Carolina,
I
Carolina
guess
guitar
I missed
line.
that section.
Right, and then really the Recording King started a little bit later, you know.
I think we had to open the store in 2013, and that's when we first started to really investigate the products a little bit more. And then they said, well, Greg Rich is there. And I'm like, oh, we know Greg Rich.
That's what I said.
Trademark everything.
Yeah.
Is
I
our
said,
name-
well, I don't want none of them
Is the
then.
Acoustic Shop trademark?
Oh my God. We got to get that fixed, guys.
I think this is an official trademark application of
I'm officially.
We have
officially
copyrighted
reserving the rights
if
to
it's
this.
in. Yeah. Anyway, no, we started selling and doing pretty well with those, especially the banjos, because I knew of your passion of banjos, and nobody was building a better import banjo at that. And I think that's what's really cool when I talk to customers about this is I knew your passion there and recognized that parts. I mean, banjos are parts.
They're parts.
They're parts. And I'm glad to hear you say that and not give me one of those like, no, they're better than parts.
No, they're assembled
But
parts.
there is nothing, that's the cool, it's both a great thing and a bad thing about banjos. I said this from my dad's a banjo player. Everybody talks about how they replace every banjo player replaces every part, does everything, and why? Because they can.
That's right. No,
it's
it's a
an
sickness.
instrument. You can literally tear it down like a old carburetor on a Chevy and put it back together again. But you knew that that's what it took was quality parts.
And I gave them the tone ring formula, all my blueprints, and man, that factory that Steve and Alan ran adhered to it. I mean, they said, and then they would build the prototype. It would come to Travis, our product manager. We would look at it together, and Travis would go, oh man, we got to work on this or that. And, really, there's a good team there. I mean, those people are dedicated to the product. So it makes it so much easier. I don't have to battle with people. All I have to do is design and say, this is what we need. They kind of say, Greg, we need a guitar that fits this thing. Travis calls me up, says, Greg, you got to do this. Okay, I'll give him a design. Calls me back, Greg, lose that, had this, and in the end, we come up with the instruments,
Right.
But we base them off the old style of, Recording King and Gibson, and very Gibson, but their own unique.
Yeah. It was funny when I first started ordering banjos and stuff. I'd call my rep or talk to somebody, and I'd say, what's Greg working on these days? I said, I was just down there the other day. He's in his office. He's building Christmas tree binding. It smells like super glue and epoxy everywhere. And the smell is just atrocious. The entire region, and all these guys that are down here know exactly what's going on. He's sitting there hand pouring and making with super glue and glitter. And you've never seen a guy that loves glitter so much.
I come out, I was living in the Bay Area, so what's new? Come on, I could leave work and just head right downtown.
So he's building all his own bindings. For a while there, you were actually working on your own USA builds.
Yep.
We sold a lot of
Again, we
those.
talked about the first time we met you at NAMM. You were debuting the Yellow
Beatles.
Submarine.
Yes,
Submarine
the Yellow
Banjo.
Submarine.
Which was we're knocked.
That's now a permanent on display in the Banjo Museum.
That's awesome, because that's what I was gonna say. This was a work of art, like the hand engraving in the back and the painting of it, and the looks of it, the skill level that you have of being able to engrave wood, engrave metals, do all this stuff it can't be overstated. It's a very
I'm
impressive.
proud to know you, and this is actually a great conversation for me because even though I'm not a big banjo player, I appreciate it.
I hate that.
He goes back wishing he could still have his old stone cutting.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
What I wouldn't give for that collection of black opals for now.
But you're now building new ones. You're going and building some new ones. I saw the prototype for the Carl Jackson model that's coming out very soon. You got to work with that. Probably was one of your heroes too, as well in the very
no
beginning.
doubt about it.
And
being
being able to bring him in, it's cool to have an option for folks that's not a $10,000 banjo, and yet still performs and does its job the way you want it.
I think what I've learned over the years is really there's those players that can hear that $100,000 sound in a mandolin. I mean, they're fine-tuned to that. They get it. They get that. But 99.9% of the people don't hear that, and they want to play. They want to have an instrument they can depend on, take it out on the road, play it, and try to. And that's kind of what we've tried to fit into. Here, hey, we're not that $15,000 mandolin or that, and we're never going to be. But what we can offer you is this, something that looks nice, has a nice, retro feel, and you can afford it. And if you break it or run over it, we get you another one.
You can afford another one.
I mean, you know, all my friends that have those pre-warbs, they don't take them out and play them anymore. They can't. They're just too expensive.
Absolutely.
I remember when we first started the shop, had some high quality banjos. Like I think it was that transition. We had some of those Johnson ones was it Johnson?
Yeah, there were some that were run
Old
for a
tone
little while.
ring, just like this incredible banjo
Before
for like
they
$600.
Switched over to Recording King banjos. That you're building some great stuff. I got a question for you because I have followed you on social media, which again,
Stalked you more like.
if you do it, go in there and
At your own detriment.
Yeah, be prepared because you'll see mummer costumes. You're going to see Zumba. You're going to see some of the wildest stuff that you've ever seen. But I did see a couple years back you were getting obsessed with gypsy jazz guitar.
Oh yeah, I love gypsy jazz.
Have you gone further with this? I know you were just.
I love it. I have too much damage in my right hand to play, and everybody goes, "Well, Django played with too." Yeah, well, Django was talented. I mean,
You should have seen Django engraved.
I mean, I have absolutely none. You know,
He wasn't much of an engraver. Was
I mean,
he?
I can get through some rhythm stuff, and
good stuff.
And I love the music, but gypsy jazz has kind of changed for me. It's like just these young kids are so hot. It's just like lick after just like try to outdo each other, make it faster, and I kind of like just the old Django stuff. Super.
Are you becoming an old guy?
I am an old guy.
I know, but you're the guy that wears pink jackets and,
well,
and baby blue shoes and stuff like that.
Hey, I live in San Francisco. I can get away with that. I mean,
so what you're saying is you're becoming the extremely crazy old guy.
Yeah. And what the great part
Fits in
about it
perfectly.
is, I don't have to worry about going out in public with my wife either because
she's not going to do that.
Yeah, she goes, I'm not going out if you're wearing that. Those are on Saturday. I've got a fantastic pair of pink pants with like little flamingos embroidered on
I
them.
can't wait to not look
on
at
another
that.
podcast
Hanging out in your
Sunday.
booth,
Yeah, no, you're not.
No, I am
you're
actually.
not. No, we have actually said
dress code.
yeah, we have people to worry about, Greg. No, I'm just kidding.
Not when I'm done.
Exactly. So on the horizon, what's cool? What's happening?
I'm still working
for
in the
Greg?
guitars and banjos and
Yeah,
mandolins.
I mean, the
pretty
company's
deeply.
always, I'm always designing stuff for the companies for the Music Link. Some of it, we will introduce over a period of time, but, the trouble is, man, we're at capacity right now. We can't they can't get enough mandolins. They can't get enough banjos, guitars. We introduced that new 342, and everything just sells as quick as the owner kind of said, well, how are we going to get new product in there? I mean, this Carl Jackson thing has been a nightmare to get kind of in there. I mean,
we were discussing it earlier. I saw the prototype over a year and a half ago.
2 years ago, just about. Yeah.
We didn't go to Spigman last year, so it was 2 years.
So, but it's coming.
It's coming.
I've been told it's coming. I've been told that I'll get to see it.
And you're going
very early.
to, hopefully you'll get one
I'll
of the
get
very
one.
first ones.
That's what I was told. I'm going to hold somebody to it.
They're really nice. I mean,
We're taking Carl's.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go get Carl's. No, it's cool to see somebody that has this much passion and love of cool old instruments and new instruments, still designing, still building really cool stuff. Jason, do you have anything for us? You've been super quiet.
I've been listening.
He
comments when
maybe
it's
at a
needed.
later date we'll do one on just Gibson stories.
I'll bet.
That's
I'll
a
bet.
whole podcast.
We're going to need a longer podcast.
and some
need to-
waivers.
We don't. Yeah, we don't want to get sued. So we're gonna stay.
No, it's cool, and I want to thank you for being with us here and taking time out of an IBMA schedule to chill out and talk and have fun. I've had a blast talking about all the various different
And also just to thank you for all the contributions you've made. We just enumerated a lot of these with Gibson, with Bridge and Taylor, Saga, and now Music Link. It's pretty impressive how many things the impact you've had on people being able to acquire high quality instruments. If you think of how many players are out there that own a Greg Rich designed instrument, it's a pretty impressive legacy you've built.
I guess I have to say thank you. Is that
That's
weird?
how-
That doesn't feel.
How
It doesn't,
painful was that?
I know it felt weird. I don't know why.
That's weird.
I think the next step is
gonna go
Greg's
golfing?
Greg's
I thought you were
gonna
gonna go
design
golfing.
a specific acoustic shop banjo.
Ooh,
Special design, special engravings of us.
He's going to let us trademark the name first.
under a bridge.
Hey, we could talk about that master tone trademark, but that involved two different companies.
Oh, geez.
And I don't want to get sued
Oh,
twice.
my God,
Stay on that
no,
one.
brother.
Hello.
I- You said if I had something
Yep.
to say,
Ladies
say
and
it now.
gentlemen, Greg-
What are you backing out now?
Our guest today has been Greg Rich.
He now can't afford anything because he is currently in
I'm
about
in another
20,
lawsuit.
25 lawsuits.
He's got litigation following him.
Litigation
Nothing
follow.
new.
Anyway, thanks so
been
much.
great.
It was a whole bunch of fun. We will get back together and talk some more stories. I think what I will next time put you is in with Jerry, and we'll talk
that'd be
about
great.
his
Jerry.
stories.
Oh, we got stories.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I've heard some of these. Oh boy,
I'll deny it.
And I'll try
I'll-
to get Jim in here too. That would be a whole
And
bunch of fun.
I talked to Jim Triggs the other day. I told him he's got to attend an IBMA
Yeah.
and get him back in here. So maybe we can talk him into Chattanooga coming down.
That'd be cool.
And maybe we get Doug Hutchins in and do like a Gibson with Jerry and all the Gibson guys.
Quite the
That'd be cool.
reunion, yeah.
Or we'll get you into the shop. Either one. We'll get you over to the acoustic shop. We'll do something there too. Thank you so much. And yeah, guys, this has been Greg Rich from the World of Bluegrass, Raleigh, North Carolina. A whole bunch of fun. And I laughed a lot.
I can't wait to see his next outfit, though.
We'll see it. Start tomorrow.
All right. We'll put photos
No,
up
it's not
on
too
this.
bad. It's kind of.
It's reserved.
Us coming to Raleigh, I wasn't sure about that.
Lawsuits.
All right, guys. We'll catch you on the next podcast.
The Acoustic Shop knows people. Handmade by Trent Pruitt, Hinkley Hinkleston, and Jason Chapman for The Acoustic Shop.
Theme song written and performed by Ofer Koren.
And please remember to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.